Hello everyone, this is Ashley Tucker. Thank you for joining me today. For today's card, I'm going to be using this stamp set from Simon Says Stamp. This is the Sketched Flowers stamp set, and I'm going to take that large floral stamp and put it in my Misti and stamp it with some Versamark ink onto some Neenah Desert Storm cardstock. Before doing the stamping, I did go over this paper with my powder tool because I plan on embossing this image, and for the embossing, I'm using Alabaster white embossing powder from Brutus Monroe. Next, I began to color in this image using my Prismacolor pencils. I absolutely love the look of colored pencils on Kraft cardstock. You have to be a little bit more careful when you're coloring in an embossed image with your colored pencils. If you're using a white embossing powder and you go over the top of it with a colored pencil in a different color, the white embossing lines can actually take on a little bit of that color, so they're kind of tinted and not pure white anymore. This discoloration is usually pretty subtle, but if it's something that's going to bother you, you need to be very careful to stay in those lines and not go over the embossing. Another thing that you want to be careful with is that you don't actually scrape away any of that embossing powder. With Prismacolor pencils, this isn't something that you really have to worry too much about because the core of the Prismacolor pencils is a really soft core. But if you're using other types of colored pencils that have a harder core, then that's something you want to be careful with. Overall, I do think that coloring in an embossed image with colored pencils is one of the easier ways to color. For this image, I chose to use a color scheme of pinks and reds, and actually this color scheme was inspired by a piece of patterned paper that I saw. So for all of my flowers, I only used two different sets of colors. So I'm going to have some lighter pink flowers, and then some really dark pink, almost red flowers. So the first thing that I did was I tried to figure out what colors I wanted to use on my lighter pink flowers. And I did that by coloring in the flower in the middle. And once I figured out the colors for my light pink flowers, I started to work on this second flower. And for this one, I wanted to figure out the colors for my dark pink flowers. Once I had all of these colors established, it was much easier and quicker to color in the rest of the card. For the lighter color flowers, I used my white Prismacolor pencil, and I also used the PC 928 color, which is blush pink, PC 929, which is pink, and PC 930, which is magenta. For the darker colored flowers, I used PC 928, PC 930, and PC 925, and those are blush pink, magenta, and crimson lake. For each of the flowers, I first started by going over the entire flower really lightly with the lightest colored pencil. I then worked my way through the colored pencils, starting with the lightest shade, going to the darkest shade, adding color and shading to the base of the petals, and then after I got to the darkest color, I'd work my way back through down to the lightest color again, and that's what really helped to blend those colors together. It's actually the same kind of way that I color when I'm using my Copic markers. So once I had all of my colors picked out, I then colored all of the rest of the light pink flowers at the same time. Coloring them all in at the same time makes it go a lot faster. Once I finished coloring in the light pink flowers, I colored in the remaining two flowers with that darker pink color scheme. Now that those flowers are all colored in, I used my white Prismacolor pencil and I colored in the rest of the image. I wanted to keep the leaves pretty light, but I did want to add a little bit of color. I used the colors PC 1021 and PC 1006, which are jade green and parrot green, and I added just a little bit of that color at the base of each of the leaves. For the little flower buds, or they could be berries, I'm not exactly sure, I decided to use some of the same colors that I used on the flowers. After that, the coloring is all done, and I'm going to move on to creating my sentiment. For the sentiment, I'm using the Love You Mama stamp set from Simon Says Stamp, and I stamped that onto a strip of vellum and I embossed it with Alabaster white embossing powder. Whenever I emboss with vellum, I like to make sure that my heat tool is really hot before I start using it, and then when I actually do start using it, I don't let it sit on the vellum for very long. I put it on and then I take it off, and I keep doing that so that I don't have any trouble with the vellum warping. I took that vellum strip and I lined it up on the background where I want to place it, and then I very carefully folded the ends around the back of that panel. Once I had both of those ends folded, I used my ATG gun to adhere both of those flaps to the back of the panel. I then glued that entire panel onto an A2 size card base. I pulled out the Girl's Best Friend sequin mix from Simon Says Stamp, and I added a whole bunch of sequins to the front of this card, and I adhered them using my Gina K Designs Connect glue. I also added a little bit of that glue underneath one of the sequins on the edge of the vellum, and that helped to hold down that vellum a little bit better. Now, I don't normally add this many sequins to my cards, but I thought that because the rest of the card was pretty simple, and because the sequins were clear and white, I could get away with adding this many embellishments. After I finished gluing all of those sequins, the card is all done. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you really enjoyed this card design using some products from Simon Says Stamp. All of the supplies that I used for today's card can be found in the description down below. If you enjoyed watching today's video and this is your first time on my channel, I would encourage you to hit that subscribe button so that you can see all of my future videos. I'm going to be back with a new card really soon. Again, thank you for watching. I appreciate all of you, and I hope you have a good day today.